Hello students, welcome to this session where we will be discussing about employee separation. Employee separation or separation of employment, which refers to the process of managing the end of the employment cycle. End of the employment cycle means when the employee is being separated from the organization. There are many different ways of separating, which may include voluntary and non-voluntary. Before going into detail, let's study about what is separation. According to Yoder, separation is a negative recruitment. It may be in the form of resignation, dismissal or discharge, suspension, retrenchment or layoff. The termination of employee from membership of the organization is referred as employee separation. The rate at which employees leave the organization is measured by the rate of employee separation. Employee separation is the process of ensuring that an employee who quits the company is exited in a structured and orderly manner. Now, there are various types of separation. There are, broadly speaking, two types of separation: voluntary or involuntary. As the name itself suggests, voluntary is when the employee leaves the organization on his own desire, whereas involuntary when the employee leaves the organization with the desire of the employer. Voluntary separation includes resignations or quits or VRS, that is known as voluntary retirement schemes. And involuntary is known as is further classified into dismissal, retrenchment, layoff, right sizing and retirement. Now, retirement is both voluntary and involuntary. Voluntary is when the employee himself or herself is willing to leave the organization. And involuntary, when he attains the age of retirement, then he has to be retired from the organization. Let us study in detail the various types. As already discussed, the separation is classified into two, voluntary and involuntary. Voluntary separation refers to the separation of employees on their own request, while involuntary means the separation of employees for organizational reasons which are beyond the control of the employee, that is, the desire of the employer. On one hand, there are costs attached with the employee separation, but on the other hand, there are some resulting benefits too. Now, what are the costs attached? Cost attached when the employee is leaving because employee has left the organization. Now the organization need to replace or fulfill the vacant place, and for fulfilling the vacant place, the organization needs to recruit and select and follow the whole procedure of selection to get the desired candidate. Therefore, it involves a lot of cost and a time. But on the other hand, it is beneficial also. Beneficial as in the case when an older employee leaves, the new blood comes in the organization. When new blood comes, new innovative ideas and new way of doing the things, a different work culture begins in the organization. Therefore, separation has both a positive and negative aspect. Positive in the sense that organization gets new people, new blood, new innovative ideas and new culture in which the organization will further work. And the limitation of employee separation is the organization may leave a loyal and a committed employee from the organization. Now, there are some of the benefits associated, like the labor cost is reduced. Since an employee is leaving, if the organization does not require, he may not recruit new employee. The employee may perform poorly or replaced. As I already told you, the innovation is increased and diversity is enhanced. Now, how an employee is separated? The first and the foremost is layoff. A layoff is a situation which cannot be avoided. It is a temporary separation of an employee from the employer. The reason could be that the employer is unable to fulfill the requirement or the employer is not having any tasks to be given. In this case, it is an initiate as the failure or refusal or inability of an employer to continue the employment of a worker whose name is in the rolls but who has not been retrenched. Now, whenever the organization again requires, the employee will be called back. It is a simple temporary separation of the employee from the organization. Now, this layoff may result because of the following reasons, like if the machinery breaks down and it repairs takes around 3 months or 4 months. Meanwhile, those 4 months organization does not have any tasks to be performed by the employee, he may separate the employee. Shortage of coal, power or raw material, or the stock is accumulated, that is the inventory of the product is too high and the demand of the product in the market may be less. Therefore, organization does not require the labor to continue the work. Therefore, the employee is separated in the form of layoff. One of the major stress triggers for human resource professionals is bearing the bad news of layoff. Because when an employee is told not to come from the next day, it is very hurting at both the parts of an employer as well as employee. In addition, losing a trusted colleague, it is also a major shock, and one's reaction is quite similar of losing a loved one. But whenever the advantage of layoff is whenever the organization again is in the better position, or when the machinery is set right, or when the raw material is available and it requires more manufacturing, they may call the employee back. Next is resignation. Resignation or early retirement refers to termination based on the employee's discretion to discontinue the employment. Now, when the employee does not want to continue the work, it is also known as early retirement, because he may not be satisfied with the organization, or generally he gets a better opportunity, then only an employee resigns from the organization. Generally, an employee resigns on securing better employment elsewhere. Sometimes female employees have to resign after marriage if the company does not have a branch in the city which she has to move to. Resignation is generally a part of the employee itself. The next is dismissal or discharge. Dismissal or discharge is a drastic step initiated by the employer. This step should be taken after careful analysis and thought. A dismissal needs to be supported by sufficient reasons and a documentary evidences. The role of the inquiry officer should be as that of a judge. Whatever decision he is taking regarding the dismissal of the employee, it should be well understood and well explained, so that the employee does not argue with the employer. Because in dismissal, the employee is dismissed from the organization and is never called back. It is a bad note for the employee. But this is only done when all the evidences, all the documents are in the favor of the employer to dismiss the employee. Now, this dismiss could be done when the employee is not working efficiently, when the employee is absent, when the employee conducts any misconduct, or when an employee shows a fake statement of qualification at the time of entry, or he may have done theft to the company's property. There could be any reason which the organization thinks is an illegal and should not be done by the employee. Then the employee is separated on the basis of dismissal. It is based on the findings. The delinquent employee can be dismissed. A worker or even a union leader can be dismissed if he uses filthy language or creates a sense that stops regular production. Then is retrenchment. Now, retrenchment refers to an employer giving a termination to a workman for any reason whatsoever otherwise than a punishment inflicit by the way of disciplinary action. It is important to remember that it does not include voluntary retirement, retirement of the workman on reaching of the age, or termination of the service of the workman as a result of non-renewal of the contract. Retrenchment is the result of the separation of an employee from her employer. It differs from layoff and dismissal. In case of layoff, the employee continues to be in the payroll of the organization and is assured of being called back after the expiry period of layoff. However, in case of retrenchment, an employee is sent for good and his or her connections with the organization completely ends. Retrenchment differs from dismissal because it means that discharge of surplus labor or staff in the industry and the removal of dead weight of uneconomic surplus. An employee can be retrenched even if a company operates at a level of profit. Retrenchment is generally done when the employer is not satisfied and does not want the employee to work in the organization. And the last is voluntary retirement scheme. Voluntary retirement schemes, as we all know, is those schemes which influences or enforces the employee to take early retirement. As in general, there is a specified retirement age, but when an employer offers voluntary retirement schemes in such an attractive manner that the employee takes the retirement before attaining the superannuation age, it is a case in which an employee has an option. It is not mandatory. It is actually a painless and time-saving method of trimming employee strength. The collective bargaining cannot object to this mode as this scheme is attractive and voluntary. Employees who opt for this scheme get handsome compensation. In other words, management pays a hefty amount to attract employees to opt for this scheme rather than retaining surplus manpower, result in recurring expenditure. Therefore, voluntary retirement schemes are also termed as separation incentive programs for the employees. It is for the betterment of the employees to leave the organization. Then, transfer. In companies, employees are transferred from one department to other of the same unit or from one unit to another, as we all know. Though transfers are usually ordered without any change in the job responsibility, sometimes they may also involve a change in the job role. In the job role case, they are often accompanied by a change in the place of the job. In some cases, the senior employees working in multinational companies are even transferred to serve in units in other countries as well. A transfer is a different form of promotion which involves a significant change in responsibility, status and income. Transfers are regular and frequent organizational phenomena. In banks and in government organizations, such as many factories, transfer in gazetted ranks as a frequent mode of promoting or shifting an employee from one place to another, or we can say separating an employee from one department to other performing the same responsibility. Some of the common reasons behind transfers are frequent disputes between employee and the controller manager, frequent complaint about by one employee by his colleagues, a change expressed by an employee with regard to his interest or capabilities to perform other tasks, or declining productivity over a given period. Work environment not suiting an employee's health, or family related issues such as marriage or continued sickness of parents. In case of shortage of manpower in one department due to explosion of demands from the customer, the management tries to deal with the situation by working extra time or multiple shifts. Furthermore, if any department has surplus manpower, the management utilizes the same by way of interdepartmental transfers. Therefore, transfers are the best way of separating and making a change of the employee by shifting from one department to other. These are other methods of separation. There are many others which I have not included in my presentation, but you can go through in the books. At last, I would conclude, separation is a typical phenomena in one's social and organizational life. Every employee needs to be separated. Once he enters the organization, an employee may have 2 to 3 separations from many organizations, and there are many employees who separate at attaining the age of superannuation. In organizations, separation happens on many grounds such as layoff, resignation, dismissal, retrenchment, voluntary retirement scheme, transfers. We have all discussed all these forms of separation. An employee separation needs to be handled with sensitivity and utmost care without injuring the sentiments of the separated employee. Because when an employee is separated, he may have very good or very bad feelings with the organization. Therefore, it needs to be handled carefully by the organization as by the employee and their family members itself. Thank you. That's all for this session.